All right. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Susan M. Hartzer-Video from the Rutgers Cooperative Extension in Ocean County. And with me tonight also is Patty Dixon from the office. Sorry. And
Rutgers
Sandra.
Cooperative Extension.
Yes, thank you. Sandra Blain-Snow from the Ocean County Recycling North. You're in the north section, or doesn't matter?
Actually, Ocean County Department of Solid Waste Management. So we're north, central, south. We're all over the county. So,
Okay,
but
so
we are physically in downtown Toms River.
Okay, and we have Tanara off screen with Sandra. So if you hear you hear another voice there. So I want to thank you again for coming on. So anybody that is just joining us, your videos are turned off. You can ask questions in the Q&A. And if there, for some reason, we aren't able to get to your question tonight, we can definitely, will answer you through email and get any questions that you need answered from there. So I'm going to let you take it away, Sandra, and welcome.
All right. Well, thank you and welcome. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for taking your Tuesday night and spending it with us to learn more about the wonderful world of worms. So I am assuming that some of you may already be avid composters because you're looking for something different to do, and that's brought you to us tonight to learn more about vermicomposting or composting in a worm bin. So before we go into vermicomposting, for those of you who might not be composters or you're very new to this, we are just going to cover a few very basic aspects of composting. So really, when we talk about composting, what we're talking about is recycling organic matter. Many of us recycle every day: bottles, glass, cans, plastic, paper, cardboard. But this is organic matter that we are recycling. And the beauty of this is we are making another product out of something. We're taking basically your kitchen and household waste, the organic portion of it. As you can see in the picture, we got some banana peels, we got some beautiful leeks and eggs and carrot peels, and all those wonderful scraps are going to be turned into this beautiful brown compost that we all like to call the real black gold, because you really can't put a price on this. And basically compost in nature, leaves, tree branches, they fall to the ground. It's a natural decomposition process. Composting is when people get involved and we actually do natural decomposition in a more controlled manner. So we're taking recycled material, like we are recycling the organic matter that we have. So many people throw this out and it goes to the garbage and into the landfill, where it really serves no purpose. If you take your organic matter and put it in your garbage and it goes to landfill, the only thing it's really going to create is methane, and we really don't want to create any more methane. But what you are going to come away with is, after you take all of these wonderful leftovers from your kitchen and maybe mix it in with some of your yard waste in your outdoor compost, you're going to have a beautiful, wonderful material that we like to call humus. And that is something that we can use as a soil amendment. So you're taking what other people might think is garbage and you're turning it into something valuable that's going to make your plants grow better. It improves your soil. You get healthier plants with this. And the nice thing about compost is, unlike a lot of fertilizer, it has many nutrients and micronutrients that you're not going to find in your standard bag of fertilizer. So we talk about organic materials. What are organic materials? Anything that's not a Twinkie or a hot dog, but really, basically, it's anything that is or was alive. So that could be plants, that can be material that's made from plants or animals. And these are all items that we can use to make compost with. So let's start with a few fun worm composting facts. Probably many of you did not know this, but worms can eat their own weight in one day. So if we think about that, if I was to eat my own weight in one day, I would weigh a heck of a lot more very quickly. I can't even imagine it. The other thing is, worms are very good workers because, unlike the rest of us, they don't sleep. So they're constantly working. Now, here's something I didn't know. Charles Darwin, we all know him from Origin of Species, talking about evolution. But when he wasn't doing that, he was studying worms for 39 years. So consider this a kind of preview to the next 39 years of your life. And I bet you're happy that you're not a worm and you're not Charles Darwin. So let's talk about the difference between your typical outdoor composting versus vermicomposting. When you compost outdoors, it's a different process. Outdoor composting actually uses heat. You have insects, you have bacteria and fungi, and these microorganisms and macroorganisms actually eat the organic material. And part of the composting process outdoors can involve heat. When you do vermicomposting, it's actually something that you can do indoors. And basically, you are feeding fruit and veggie scraps to some very special worms. And the thing about vermicompost is it's not a hot composting method. We'll talk about why. Okay, so hot and cold composting. When you compost outdoors, some of you may be cold composters, some of you may be hot composters, or maybe you're like me, you do a little bit of both. What's the difference? Cold composting is basically where you have a compost bin and you continually add material to it. You add your food scraps to it. You cover it up with leaves so that you don't get any little animals that want to pull stuff out. And it takes much longer because you're not generating heat. You're not generating heat because you're not doing a heck of a lot. You're not turning it. You're not adding water to it. You're just adding material to it. So it's going to take you about a year or two before you're going to produce any finished compost. And typically you're harvesting it from the bottom of your bin. Okay, this is an ongoing process. If you were to put a compost thermometer in there, there wouldn't be a lot going on. Hot composting is a completely different process. You are actually stockpiling materials because you need to build your pile all at once. So I will save up fruit and vegetable scraps. I always have a regular supply of leaves in my yard to use. And you take everything and you put it in that bin all at one time. You mix it very well. You add water, you turn it to get oxygen into it. And then you put your compost thermometer in it. And within a couple of days, it's going to start to heat up. So this is a much more active process. So we're going to take a look. This is actually in the first picture, you will see my compost bin. I started that bin in February. Keep that in mind when you look at the temperatures that are going on. That bin was full to the very top with leaves, organic material. I got it right. I got the C/N ratio good. I put the thermometer in. And within a couple of days, I would say 3 to 4 days later, that pile started to go down. That's probably by about, I want to say 6 to 8 inches right there. It's already starting to decompose because it is heating up quickly. And in the middle picture, you see the compost thermometer. There it is at 100 degrees. That's in February. It was cold out. It could go up to 110, 120. It could hit 140 if I'm really actively working that hot compost pile. How do you feel as a person when it hits 100 degrees? You feel miserable because it's too hot. Well, guess what? Worms don't like heat either. They don't like 100 degrees. That's going to kill them. So worms do not like hot composting. So when you do your indoor vermicomposting, what is vermicompost and what is vermicomposting? As you can see in the top picture, there I am scooping up some finished vermicompost. Basically, it's glorified worm poop. So it's worm castings. The worms eat organic matter, they digest it, and they poop it out. And it becomes a wonderful addition to your soil. And what you're doing here is vermicomposting is the process of creating a bin indoors. You add special worms. We'll talk about that type of worm. And basically they spend all their time eating, reproducing, pooping, repeat. That's all they do. Different types of worm bins. You have the DIY bin in the first picture. That's what we are going to show you how to make tonight, because we want to get you started with something simple and cheap. The one in the middle is a countertop worm bin. I actually have one of these. My daughter bought it for me. It was very expensive. It's aesthetically very pleasing. It's ergonomically designed. I honestly don't know how to use it. I'm still working that one out, trying to figure it out. So I'm not going to steer you towards that one. Start with something simple. The final picture is a worm tower, and this is one that you will probably see for sale online. This is actually a 4-tray system, and how a worm tower works is that you have a base and you have a set of legs. You'll see a spout or spigot on it. That is for the collection of leachate. When most of us think of leachate, we think of like the nasty stuff that, that oozy, nasty stuff that oozes out of landfills. Well, composting also creates leachate, but we want this kind of leachate because it's good. So the bottom part of the worm tower is actually like a trough or like a funnel. It actually has angled sides so that the leachate that is going to be created through the composting process can gather at the bottom, and you can open that spout and take the leachate out as it builds up. And we'll talk about what you can do with that leachate. The first tray that you see above the trough, like funnel shaped area, the first tray is where you're going to add your food scraps, your worms, and your bedding material. Typically, bedding material can be newspaper. And that's where you're going to start. And as the worms work through that first tray, they're going to make compost for you. And what happens is when that first tray turns into mostly compost, you're going to want the worms to move on, and the worms are going to want some new material. So you're going to start adding fruit and vegetable scraps to the second tray, and worms are going to migrate up towards the new food. So that means you can take that first tray out, you can harvest your compost. That's what's so nice about a worm tower, is that you have those 4 trays. You can take that first tray out, you've got finished compost, your worms have migrated to the second tray where you've added food to it, and you just keep doing that. You empty out the finished compost and you put the first tray back on the top, and you just keep going layer by layer by layer. The do-it-yourself bin is actually just a 2-tray system. So you have the top bin, that's where you're actively composting, and the lower bin is the collection unit where you will collect the leachate. Okay, so where do you want to locate your worm bin? That depends on your personal decorating style. One really convenient place is if you have room under your sink, you can certainly fit a bin under there. And that's very convenient because most of us produce organic waste in our kitchen. That's where we're cooking, we're preparing food. So to be able to open the door underneath your sink and to just plop that stuff in there, that's great. It looks like the one that they're using here is a combination Rubbermaid container, and looks like a kitty litter pan to me. So interesting, very interesting use of materials people probably had on hand. Another option is your basement or garage. Might not be as convenient as under your sink, but it's certainly an option if you don't want to have it right up close in your house. The only thing you have to worry about, basement's no problem. Basement will stay warm enough. We don't want the worms to freeze. However, your garage, if it gets very, very cold, if it goes down below freezing, that's not going to make your worms very happy. They like basically the same temperatures that we like. And if you're daring and you want to impress your house guests, you can always have one right in your living room and use it as an end table, or possibly a coffee table if you want. It's certainly a conversation starter when people come over. Okay, so I keep talking about these special worms. What are these special worms? Well, don't go out in your yard and dig up earthworms, okay? Your common earthworm is bigger. You can tell the difference between them. An earthworm is big. The red wigglers that we use for vermicomposting, they're small. So the problem is an earthworm likes to burrow. They like to burrow underground, and they also consume soil. and they extract the nutrients for it. We like to have the earthworms around because they're great at aerating the soil. The other thing, they're bigger. They're like between 1/4 of an inch, if they're small, all the way up to 6 inches or longer. And they tend to be reddish brown. Some of them are a little bit paler. They are underground. They don't get a lot of light, so they don't tan very well. But if you put an earthworm in a worm bin, they're going to be very unhappy because they want to dig down and they want to go deeper than your worm bin. So they will not be happy in a worm bin. But the red wiggler, the Icena fetida, and they go by many names. They could be red wiggler, brandling, compost, manure worms. This is what you want to use for your compost bin. And why do we want to use that? Because they're surface dwellers. They like to stay in the upper surface. Can you find red wigglers out in your yard? Yes, you can. You will, if you dig down into a pile of leaves, you will find them there. You will even find them in your outdoor compost bin. They tend to be in the upper layer. And you're wondering, but wait, you just said if they're out, if your worm bin's in your garage and the worms are getting too cold, they're not going to be happy. So how can they be in your compost bin outdoors? Well, the thing is, if it's an outdoor compost bin, it's much larger than your worm bin. And that volume is going to create an extra degree of insulation that they would not have sitting in a little plastic tote in your garage. And the great thing about red wigglers is they are voracious eaters and they love to do nothing more than eat organic matter. And when you look at these worms, you can see there is a distinct difference between them and the common earthworm. They are tinier, they are skinnier, they are thinner, and they tend to be more of a reddish purple. And they don't get as big. They're only going to be about 2 to 3 inches long and definitely much thinner than an earthworm. Worm anatomy lesson. Okay, so how do worms make this magic compost in your house for you? Well, worms have a mouth and they have sensory cells all over their body, okay? And they also have something called setae, which are like little hairs on their body. They're kind of, it helps them move around. This is how worms get through all of that organic matter that you're feeding them. The worms sense food and basically get it in their mouth. They suck it up in their pharynx, they move it on, it travels to the esophagus and into their crop. And then it goes to the gizzard where it uses grit for digestion. So we talked about the earthworm. We know they like to eat soil. So that's where they're going to get their grit from. So where are the red worms going to get grit? You're not putting them in a bucket of soil in your house. You're feeding them fruits and vegetables and some newspaper. We'll talk about the source of grit. So their intestines, they absorb the food nutrients, and then when they're done with it all, boom, they poop it out, and voila, we have worm castings. Enough about worm anatomy. Now we're going to move on to the next part. And if you have any young viewers in the audience, you may want to ask them to leave the room because now we are going to discuss the birds and the bees as it applies to worms. How do worms make more worms? Well, worms line up to one another. They line up their heads and they attach to one another. And the magic worm reproduction process begins. A cocoon forms. You can see that right there. That's in the clitellum or clitellum, however you want to produce it. They're very good at reproducing. Hatchlings will mature in about 11 weeks. They're going to produce about 2 to 3 cocoons per week. And each cocoon is going to have about 2 to 4 babies in it. So their population can double pretty rapidly. And this happens about every 60 to 90 days if the right conditions are met. So you want to make your worms very comfortable. Maybe put on some mood music. Definitely low lighting, definitely. And if you look very closely, now I have to tell you, these pictures are enlarged so you can see it better. You can find cocoons. You will see them in the vermicompost. It is very small, but if you look closely, you will find them. So now that these worms have gone about their business, they're making new worms, and we need to know, how are you going to care and feed for those little young worms and the adult worms? Well, Worms are interesting. They don't have a nose, but they breathe oxygen, and they do this through their skin. You're going to find out worms do a lot of things through their skin. And because of this, they like to stay moist. In fact, they have to stay moist to be able to breathe. So that's why they like moist, wet conditions, not too wet. They don't have lungs, but they breathe air in like humans do, and they also breathe out carbon dioxide. They also don't have any eyes. So how are they sensitive to light? Well, once again, through their skin. They sense light through their skin. When you open your worm bin and take the lid off, you watch those worms. They're going to dive down to the bottom of the bin to get away from the light. Another thing, worms don't have teeth, but much like older people, they love sweets and mushy food. So keep that in mind when you're throwing those leftovers and fruit and veggie scraps in. You don't want them too big because they have no teeth. So, they can't really eat things very well without teeth. And the body hair, that helps them move about, and it also helps them cling to surfaces. So you'll see worms actively working in your worm bin, and sometimes you will see them clinging to the side of the worm bin. Those body hairs, that's how they do this. And much like older adults who move to Florida or retire to, say, Arizona, they like warm temperatures. They're like us. They prefer 65 to 80 degrees. That's where they're most comfortable, and they're most likely to reproduce and eat and do well. And again, they prefer a dark environment. So when we talk about composting, whether it's outdoors or indoors, we always talk about CN ratio, which is basically carbon to nitrogen. And that comes down to browns and greens. So carbon, the brown materials are going to be carbon based, and the green materials are going to provide nitrogen. And it's important that we get that ratio right. Too much nitrogen, it's going to be pretty wet and sloppy in that bin, and too much brown material, and your worms are going to be complaining that their skin's dry, and if their skin's dry, they're not going to be happy. What sources do you have for browns and greens? In the great outdoors, you have everything. You don't only have your fruit and veggie scraps, your household waste, you have leaves, you have leftover plants, your trimmings when you prune your plants, and you have lots and lots of leaves. Some people who do a worm bin will use shredded leaves in their worm bin. I prefer to work in a more closed environment, more controlled. I don't like to introduce anything from the great outdoors. So I rely predominantly on newspaper, shredded paper, also chipboard and paperboard. Until recently, we were not accepting chipboard in our recycling, so I was very big on using it. I would put it through my shredder and use it for bedding and a brown material for my worms. And if you're wondering, what the heck is she talking about? Chipboard, paperboard. Chipboard is actually the type of boxes that your cereal, pasta, tissue boxes, that would be chipboard. You look at it, the inside looks brown, but it's very thin, unlike corrugated cardboard. You could also use corrugated cardboard if you want, but I think it's great if you can use shredded paper and also chipboard. If you can, anything that you can take out of the waste stream that might not get recycled as much, it's always good to use that. Also, good old paper towel and toilet paper rolls. They're excellent. Some people like to use dryer lint. I'm not big on that just because my husband's very fond of a lot of laundry fabric softener and a lot of dryer sheets, and I'm not really sure how worms feel about that. Yeah, microplastics too. So for the green materials, that's really easy to come up with. So fruits and vegetables, also coffee grounds and tea leaves, and eggshells are another excellent addition that you can add to your worm bin. And the way to remember the ratio is, you can do a lot with ratios. You'll hear 30 to 1, 2 to 1, 1 to 1. My way of thinking of it is really simple. You need a heck of a lot more brown material than you do green material. Brown material is going to keep the stink down, and it's going to also absorb excess moisture. What do worms love to eat? Worms love melons. Give them a watermelon rind, a cantaloupe rind, honeydew, any type of melon. They love it. The big thing to avoid is citrus fruits. Berries, apples, pears, any type of fruit is good, but anything in the citrus family, worms do not like. Another thing they like, vegetables, they love squash because, again, soft and mushy. But they will also eat green beans or any other type of vegetable you may have, whether it's spinach, lettuce, broccoli, all great items for them. What do worms not like? Again, citrus. No oranges, limes, lemons, grapefruits. Why? Because have you ever accidentally squirted yourself in the eye with a grapefruit or an orange or a lemon? You know how that feels. And remember what we said about worms. They don't have eyes. They feel and they see and they breathe through their skin. So if you can imagine inhaling that, getting it in your eye, you're not going to be very happy with it. Also, the rinds on citrus fruits have oils in them that can be very irritating. It can burn their skin. So again, we don't want to do that. We want our worms happy and comfortable. Another thing they don't like, and this will make my colleague Tanara very happy, they don't like onions, okay, or garlic. This also can burn their skin. You can put in small quantities, but certainly not large quantities. The other thing, bread. It says you can add bread, but people tend to get a little carried away with the bread. It molds quickly. It can become a problem. We did a worm bin for a grade school. They called us a few months later and said, hey, we're having a problem with the worm bin. Could you give us some hints? Check it out. And we looked in, and apparently school lunches are not the healthiest for children or for worms. It was a lot of hot dog buns, but thankfully no hot dogs. So yeah, stay away from the hot dog buns. And the things you never want to feed worms: no meat, fish, oil, and dairy. Basically the same things that you don't want to put in your compost bin. Worms will not appreciate this, and you're not going to appreciate the smell it creates, especially if your worm bin is a coffee table or an end table in your living room. So I know that one of the attachments you received was a handout about how to create a worm bin. And there's some wonderful, excellent material in it. They get down to sizes, lengths, depth, width, whatever. I try to keep it very simple. What we think of is 1 cubic foot of bin space and 1 pound of food waste for 1 pound of worms. So this is my 1:1:1 ratio that I like because it's very simple and I'm bad at math. So 1 pound of worms will eat 1 pound of food waste in 1 week. And the average family, say 2 to 3 people, produces about 2 pounds of food waste per week. So that tells you that you might need something slightly larger than 1 cubic foot of space in your bin. So on the other side, you will see a list, and this is a breakdown so that you know when you go to the store, be it Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, wherever you can find a plastic tote, these are the standard gallon sizes. And it also tells you what the cubic feet are. So if you know that you produce a lot more food waste or you have more family members producing food waste, you know that you're probably going to need a larger worm bin to handle all of the food. I don't, because I compost outdoors and indoors. So I'm never going to really overwhelm my worm bin. If the only thing that you're using is a worm bin, you're probably going to want to make it a little bit bigger. So here's the details on how to build your own worm home. You can go out and purchase 2 10-gallon plastic totes. I would normally say that it would cost you under $20 to create this, but as we know, commodity prices are up. Plastic is more expensive. So these totes are going to be a little more expensive, but if you have some laying around the house already, feel free to use those. So you take the 2 10-gallon totes, you're going to set 1 lid aside and you're going to keep 1 lid. Mark the bottom of the first tote at 1-inch intervals. Ruler, Sharpie marker is great. These holes in the bottom of the first tote, that's going to be for moisture drainage. You want the moisture to drop down into the lower container. If you have a rechargeable drill, most of us have those, get a 1/4-inch drill bit and just drill holes all across the bottom of the tote. And you're going to do the same along the top edge of the tote and across the lid. I know in your handout it has some fancy, holes drilled in with screening. You can certainly do that. I just find that this is the easiest way and it works well for me. So here we are, we're looking at bin number 1. As you can see, that's the one that has all the holes in it. And you have bin number 2. It only has holes along the top edge. Bin number 1 is going to nest inside bin number 2. And the lid, as you can see, that has some holes on the top also. That's the lid that you kept. And you also put holes in it. That's for aeration. The ones in the bottom are for drainage. The ones on the side and top, aeration. Worms like to breathe, just like we do. So bin number 1, that's going to hold the food and the bedding and your worms. Bin number 2 is going to act as a catch base. Now, here's something else you want to do. If you are interested in creating your own spout or spigot, actually it's going to be a spout because I don't know that there's any that you can turn them on or off. Really simple, just go to any hardware store and pick up a simple plumbing piece. I got a little crazy with washers. I was worried about leakage, but if you drill a hole in the, not the bottom, but the, like at the lower edge of the outer bin, the one that's the catch base, you can just take that plastic plumbing piece, the spout, and screw it in with maybe a little silicone caulk. That's fine. You don't have to go crazy with the washers like I did. Okay, now that you got your worm house built, what are you going to do? You're going to do like everybody else. You're going to go on the internet and you're going to purchase worms. 1 pound of worms equals about 1,000 worms. I don't know that anyone actually counts them, but that's what they say you get with a pound. And that is enough to start with. What you're going to do is you're going to prepare about 3 inches of bedding. I like to use moistened newspaper or again, the chipboard and shredded paper. Make a nice comfortable bed for them. Then you're going to add your fruits and vegetable scraps, your tea bags, your coffee grounds, and you'll look at that center photo and you see that little green measuring cup and it's got some ground up stuff in it. Remember when we talked about the green materials? And at the very bottom, I had eggshells. And we talked about how worms need grit to help them digest. This is your grit right here. Take your eggshells. When you're done, just wash them out, let them dry, put them in a plastic bag or a couple of paper towels or a towel, and just whack them with a mallet or roll over them with a rolling pin until they're nice and fine. And you can add those to your worm bin. That's about a half a cup of ground eggshells. They're going to appreciate it because they're going to want the grit for digestion. But another thing is that it's also going to add calcium, which is going to help them reproduce. So that's another good added benefit. Once you've got those all added, you're going to cover it with a nice like bedding material. You're going to cover it with moistened newspaper and just fill that bin up to the very top with newspaper. And I just want to let you know that when you order worms, they will either be shipped to your doorstep, or if you're like me, they're going to be shipped to your post office. And you're going to go there and you're going to pick them up, and it's going to be in a box, and there's going to be a big label on it that says live worms. And when you get that bag, you're going to open it up, and there's going to be what looks like peat moss in there. And you think you've got nothing in there until you dump it out. And those worms will be like in something that looks like a small ball all wound up together. But once you put them in the bin and they see the food, they will spread out. It kind of looks like a ball of spaghetti. With the right conditions, if you provide the right conditions, sand ratio is right, moisture, aeration, you could probably have finished compost from your worms in about 3 months. I probably harvest about 3 to 4 times a year, depending on how good I am at, keeping my worm bin. So the other thing, when we talked about hot and cold composting, and we said vermicompost is a cold composting method, because of that, if you have any seeds, tomato seeds, pepper seeds, cantaloupe, anything like that, those seeds, there's a very good chance that they are going to sprout, because unlike a hot compost pile, it will not kill off the seeds and the worms do not eat the seeds. If you just go in occasionally and just, disturb the seedlings, that will be enough to kill them off and they will just decompose. So now you look in your bin and you're like, ooh, miraculous. All I see is brown stuff and maybe a teeny little bit of bedding left. I'm ready to harvest my compost. You'll see some uh, procedures where they take the compost, dump it all out on newspaper, have the bright lights on the worms all migrate to the bottom, and then you're scooping the finished compost. It's messy, and I feel it's kind of, it disturbs the worms, and I don't like to disturb the worms. I like to keep it simple. I take all the finished compost and I move it to one side of the bin. Then I add fresh material, fresh fruits, vegetables, tea, coffee, eggshells. I add that material over into that empty spot where I moved all the finished compost from. Then I add the newspapers on top. Wait about 3 days to a week for the worms to migrate over to the fresh food that I put out for them, because they like the finished compost, but you get tired of leftovers after a while and you want something fresh. They're going to move over into the fresh food and work on that. To collect the finished compost, you're just going to scoop it out, and if there's any stray worms, just pull them out of the finished compost, put them back in the bin. Be gentle with them. What can you do with vermicompost? Aside from, you could add it to your house plants. You could add probably about 25% to the potting soil that you have. Just put it on top. Just maybe dig it in a little with a trowel or a fork or whatever you may have. They'll enjoy that. But another thing you can do is you can make vermicompost tea, just like you make compost tea. Only this time you're going to fill up a sock or a mesh bag, and you're going to put it in a 5-gallon pail of water. Just stir it around, let it sit for a few days. There are people who will actually take a pump from an aquarium and they will put in there and let it bubble through to oxygenate it, aerate it. But certainly swishing it around and stirring it up occasionally works just as well. And you want to dilute this. So if you have a 5-gallon pail, this is basically a 2-to-1 ratio. So 5 gallons of worm tea is going to make 10 gallons for you. That's a lot. You can use it to water your plants with. You could make a foliar spray out of it. And we also talked about that spigot or spout on the bottom of the worm tower or the bin that you create. That's to collect the leachate. When you collect your leachate, you can mix that and add it to water. That's a 10-to-1 ratio. And again, you can use that to water plants or to spray on your plants. What are some problems you might encounter? Bad smell. Okay, this is especially bad if it's sitting in your living room as a conversation piece. You don't want it to smell bad. I created a worm bin for a project for a Rutgers class I was doing. We created a composting program in our office. The worm bin sat underneath my desk in my office cubicle, and I collected like scraps from everyone in the office, and I quietly fed my worms, and I told no one about it because I didn't want anyone to have any preconceived notions. And I also didn't want anyone to suspect, so that when I brought it out, I could say, well, worm bin, it's been here all the time. I've been making compost and nobody noticed, no smells, nothing. So if you do get a bad smell, what is going wrong? It could be too wet. You could be feeding your worms too much. It could be the wrong type of food that you're putting in, and perhaps not enough air circulation. So that's why you want to make sure you have those holes in the bin. So if you're putting anything in there that you shouldn't, like maybe you threw a fish head in or something crazy like a piece of cheese, you want to remove that right away. You're going to want to feed your worms less, and you can always add dry bedding. Typically, when you do the newspaper and you add it to a new bin, you moisten it with water and you squeeze the excess water out and you kind of fluff up the newspaper and put it in. But if it's too wet in your bin, just tear strips of newspaper. And the best way to do this is there's a pattern to the newspaper, the way the grain runs. So newspapers are generally folded in half. So if you start from the top of the fold and tear it down straight, it's going to tear in perfect straight pieces. Just take the dry strips of newspaper and add that to your worm bed bin. It will suck up the excess moisture. Fruit flies. That's another problem, especially around September, August, September in my house. But a lot of times fruit flies come in on fruit that you purchased in the store, and they have a perfect environment in your worm bin. So make sure that the food scraps that you put in are immediately covered up with bedding. Again, it could be too much wet, too much green material. You're going to want to add more brown material. So back to the newspaper, shredded paper, cover the food with that, and maybe hold back on feeding the worms. Give them a little less like food. And then the other thing is worms escaping. You never want to walk into your mudroom, and God forbid it should be the end table in your living room, and find worms dangling from the edge of your worm bin, worms, thrashing about on your floor. You don't want to see that. And if you're a worm and you're happy and someone's giving you like 3 meals a day, you're not going to want to leave that worm bin. So something has to be wrong with it for them to like try and commit, worm suicide. And probably it's lack of oxygen, and that can be due to a number of reasons. You're overfeeding your worms. Again, bin is too wet. Maybe you didn't put enough ventilation holes in your in the lid, or it could be too acidic. So make sure you're not giving them citrus. So what you're going to do is you're going to stop adding food. You're going to add the dry bedding material. You see there's a common theme here: less wet, more dry. It solves a lot of problems. It's going to, the dry material, like the newspaper, is going to absorb the moisture. And then another thing is to cut down on acidity. Add some more ground eggshells. Anytime you have eggshells, crush them up, add to your worm bin. Think of it as like Tums or Rolaids for your worm bin. It's going to cut down on acidity and also give them a boost of calcium. Not that they have bones, but they'll appreciate it. What are the benefits of vermicompost and what are the uses? Well, as I said, all they do is eat, poop, and reproduce. Red wigglers eat a lot. So that right there makes the composting process go much more quickly. Also, this ensures a very high quality of compost. It's a fairly closed system, and I can honestly tell you, if you were to look at a batch of compost that you made outdoors and a batch of compost that you made in a worm bin, the worm bin compost is going to look a little darker and a little richer. It's just that fine. And it's also going to be, that's another thing, it's going to be much finer because the materials are smaller that you're giving to the worms, and also the brown material that you're giving them. There's no twigs, branches, big, huge leaves. So it's a much finer material. So the other thing is the worm castings, they're alive with soil-friendly bacteria, which your plants and your soil are going to really, really appreciate. And it's also, a lot of people, we spend a lot of time and money going to stores and buying fertilizers, but you can make this for free at home. It's more nature friendly, it's non-toxic, it's good for the environment. Why do you want to do a worm bin? Maybe you don't have a big yard. Maybe you don't have a yard at all. Maybe you live in an apartment or a condo or a townhouse. It's perfect for smaller locations. Also, vermicompost, much like compost, it's going to increase soil porosity. It increases the nutrient content. It's great for houseplants. You might occasionally end up with a worm in your houseplant, not the worst thing to happen. And it's also good, not as a straight seed starting medium, but it's good to add to your seed starting medium. It's going to add a little more, a little more rich nutrients and give them a good start in life. Okay. And then finally, if you want to learn more about worm composting, there are many books out there, so many resources online, just some of them that I've listed here. Some of the books, the classic Worms Eat My Garbage, that has been around forever. It probably started the vermicomposting craze, if you will. The other one is, worm composting for beginners. And if you are a teacher or if you have young kids, 2 books that are great for kids: Compost Stew, and also, the one about, turning your lunch scraps into compost. And this is a great project for schools and for kids. Kids love this. In fact, every time we do an event at a school, the one thing that is sure to grab their attention and keep them going, whether they're thrilled or grossed out by it, is going to be the worm bin. In fact, we have a new promotional item that we're working on, stickers for kids. We call it our I Touched a Worm program, because every kid always brags, I touched a worm, and they're all excited about this. Worms get a little manhandled, but that's, they survive. So a couple of places, Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, if you're looking for any type of composting supplies, especially vermicomposting, that's a great website. Planet Natural. Gardeners is Gardener's Supply. Gardens Alive is another one. Worm Composting Headquarters. But just go online, Google vermicomposting. There's a wealth of information out there. My recommendation when ordering worms, unless of course you know someone who's weird like me and happens to have spare worms to give away, order from a place that's close by. It's better to have worms. You don't want them traveling too far. We had the situation one year where the county ordered worms for me for a worm bin, and they came from California. And when I went to pick them up, I opened the box. Horrible smell, horrible sight. It was a particularly cold winter, and the worms froze. So the next time, the lady running the program ordered them from New York, and she said, no more California worms. I'm ordering New York worms. They're tougher, and they're also closer to home. And just to thank you and let you know that if you have any questions, you can always reach us at either of the links that you see below, either our website for recycling, or go to Compost at CO Ocean NJUS. You can send us your questions. We also take requests for presentations there. And I think if we have any questions, oh, and please like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. We even have Pinterest now.
Sandra, that was great. You just had so much humor. It was just the right amount. But we do have a few questions.
Okay. Maybe I'll have an answer.
No, well, some of them we answered a couple, but one of them was specifically you had mentioned before about earthworms and rain and being able to breathe. But why do earthworms appear on my driveway when it rains?
Okay, not an entomologist or a worm specialist, but generally if it's a particularly heavy rain, I believe it just basically, if they're up closer to the surface, it will wash them out. So if you see a worm on your driveway or your sidewalk, please throw it back into the soil.
And we've also seen that actually they can't breathe. If it's too waterlogged, they can't breathe.
That's the other thing. Yes, if the soil is too waterlogged, remember they are forming, tunnels underground. If that tunnel gets full of water, they're going to come up to the surface.
And okay, and then another question is, could you use seashells for grit?
Okay, that is a good question. I believe they have, I can't remember if they have magnesium or manganese in them. I am not sure on the seashells. You want to try looking that one up quick? Shells, because I know we have a lot of quahog shells, and people do use them for pathways and in gardens. I don't know if you could grind them. I think they would be too bulky. I think
what I was thinking.
yeah, I think it would be hard to get them ground down small enough for the worms to digest them. That's going to be my uneducated answer on that one. I have to
That was a good question.
That is an excellent question. Now you got me wondering. So, but I will surely, if we have an answer before this evening, we'll let you know. And if not, I'll shoot you over an answer to Sue and she can relay it to everyone. Any other questions?
Yep. Go ahead, Sandy.
We do.
I mean,
we have one here. What do you know what the shelf life of compost tea is?
No, I do not actually know what the shelf life of it is. I try to use it fairly quickly. Typically, I just go out and use it almost immediately. I'll put it in a watering can and, put it on all my plants. So I would say use it fairly quickly. If it's kept cooler, maybe. Uh, um, don't leave it in your refrigerator and let someone accidentally drank it thinking it is TNT. But I'm not sure about the shelf life on that one. Just use it quickly would be my advice. Oh, and another thing, one thing, speaking of that, if you have food scraps and say you need to cut back on your, feeding your worms, you can always put them in your refrigerator. And if you have to, you can freeze them and just bring them out later, defrost them and give them to the worms. So.
And that's actually, yeah, that was perfect. We have MJ who is a teacher. She had five, or he or she, sorry. They had 5 to 10 worm bins in her classroom for years. They ate salad bar leftovers that had been frozen and thawed.
Okay.
No urgency for her schedule to match the cafeteria ladies, plus freezing broke up the cell walls. But one must be aware of the brassicas, the cauliflower, and broccoli overload. So
Yeah.
sorry, I shouldn't assume she, but they mentioned. So.
Well, yes, none of us want gassy worms. So, but yes, there is a smell that comes with cruciferous vegetables. Tanera did find it has to be it has to be a powder form. So,
With the seashell.
with the seashells, yes,
Mhm.
it would have to be a powder form. Yeah, compost tea can be stored for up to 4 to 6 days in a sealed, light-proof container. Oh, and if you need to store it longer, did they recommend?
Freezing it?
Store it longer, you will have to provide aeration, like a bubble stone or an
It's okay,
aquarium
you can
pump.
put it in the fridge.
Yeah, you can put it in the fridge. Just, my family's used to finding some strange stuff in the refrigerator, so.
Yeah, I'm thinking it might get a little algae if it stayed too long without
Yeah,
any
mold or
aeration.
algae. But, because of these questions, now I can go back and add that information. And I apologize, I don't always have the answers because I've just done this for 20 years and I haven't really thought about it. If I see a problem, I'm more of an intuitive composter. So it's like, oh, worms are jumping to their death. Oh, I've ignored the worm. And we fix that.
Well, I was gonna say, MJ also made a comment too that all was great until until they took the worm bin to an outdoor event for a show and tell. A few weeks later, they had forward fly infestation,
Oh,
and that bin ended up being reused in another manner. But the people really did love the bin, so she said maybe it was worth it anyhow. But the next question from DB came in: should you move it to an outside area in a warmer weather to increase output? And I'm assuming that would answer that.
It's not really going to increase output. You can move it. I do move mine out in the summer, but I put it on my back deck and I keep it in the shade, especially if we get some really hot spells. But one of the reasons that I say that I don't use it, because you will read, and it's fine if other people have done it, but I try to be extra careful. To take a scoop of soil from the great outdoors or to bring leaves and things in to use for bedding material. The reason I don't, and I prefer to keep it a closed system, is what I like to call the story of the very hungry centipede. It's like the very hungry caterpillar, only it doesn't have a happy ending. I put my worm bin out and it sat on the ground, and somehow a voracious centipede got in. And centipedes are great to have in your regular compost bin. They serve a purpose. But in a worm bin, it's an all-you-can-eat food bar for them. So I ended up with a worm bin that I was like, why is my worm bin smelling? Where are all my worms? And a very fat and happy centipede had seen to the demise of them. Yeah, so that's why I keep it as a closed environment.
And that makes sense. That's a good,
Yeah,
that's a good question.
yeah.
All right, Patty, I'll let you go on the next one.
So there's another comment from MJ,
Mhm.
and they said that they had success getting worms by the pound from a local bait shop. They understood exactly what I needed, and I was also willing to wait until they placed an order so they could share the shipping.
Mhm.
And they weren't earthworms. They were,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, if they know if they know that it's red wigglers, a lot of times people make the mistake of going to a bait shop and what they end up getting is actually night crawlers, which you don't want. And we did have this problem one time where The wrong worms were sent to us for a demonstration that we were doing somewhere, and we just kind of put them aside. And luckily, I had enough in my worm bin that I was like, "Here, have a Dixie cup of worms," you know. So yeah, just make sure they're definitely red wigglers. They're going to be really small and tiny.
So we have another question from Anita. Can we use worms picked up in wet areas or even from the garden?
Again, you're going to have to really know what those worms are. So if you're good at worm ID, yes, but I just find it's easier. They really don't cost that much. I'm not really sure where prices are at right now, but believe it or not, they do have buy one, get one offers on worms. So you can buy 1 pound of worms and get a second pound for free. I would say you're looking in the maybe $30 range for a pound of worms. You know where they're coming from. It's a reputable source. You're not taking any chances. Certainly, you could look in your compost bin and, you know, along the top, because like we said, they are surface dwellers. You can find red worms, but you know, you really want to make sure when you first start. My suggestion is order the worms so that you know what you're getting, and also you're getting a larger amount. If you're going to be spending a lot of time in your yard looking for worms. So they reproduce quickly, but still.
Yeah, Judy has a question about, I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but peanut shells, are peanut shells allowed?
Yeah, peanut shells would be allowed. They're thin. I've added them to mine. If you got into like harder shells, it might take a while for them to break down, but certainly peanut shells are fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'll do Cheryl's question and then Patty, I'll let you go from there. She has
Okay.
a worm tower with no tea, always dry, yet some worms are still migrating to the cover.
Okay.
Is what might
It
be
sounds like if
troubleshooting?
you're not really getting worm tea, the leachate, it might just be that it is too dry and you could add more green material to it. It really depends sometimes. Also, like seasonally, if it's warmer weather and stuff, if you do take your worm tower out, sometimes that can make a difference. You know, humidity, moisture. Typically in our houses, it tends to be much drier because in the summer we're running air conditioning. In the winter, it's the heat that's especially drying. So you might want to either, you know, moisten the bedding more or add more green materials to it. And you don't really have to, you know, you don't need a lot of leachate. A little bit of leachate, you know, or worm tea goes a long way.
Go ahead.
We have Kathy asking about the size of the green material. So how small does it have to be? Like, for instance, a banana peel.
Oh, okay. Well, typically I do slice and dice things up much finer for the worms. I've always thought it would be great if you just had like a you know, a Cuisinart or you know, a food processor and put it in there. You don't have to, certainly, but just, you know, dice it up relatively small. Don't throw the whole banana peel in there. It will break down over time. It will just take longer. But when I do the composting talk, I talk about size and surface area. So the smaller that something is, you know, the more you cut it up, the more surface area that it makes readily available for the worms, in this case, insects and worms in a regular compost. So dice it up small. But hey, if you feel like you want to try it, throw it in a food processor if it's easier. I can tell you, I've thrown avocados, like say you have an avocado that hasn't, you know, like it got too ripe, and I've thrown it in there. The avocado would disappear, but the peel, which is fairly leathery, will like last for quite a while. The same with the cantaloupe rinds. You'll see like all of the like little bit of cantaloupe left, like it's gone, but you'll still see like a faint pattern of the cantaloupe rind. So a good reason to cut stuff up small.
Yeah, just two more in particular. Larry has a comment saying that he has an outdoor compost bin next to his vegetable garden. Can I use bean plants and tomato plants for food when I put my garden to bed? Address timing of worms. So I'm not sure if he's confusing the composting versus the vermicomposting on that one.
Okay, so outdoor, and it was tomato plants, and what was the other one?
Beans.
Beans. Okay, if it's in, if it's in an outdoor compost bin, if it's a hot bin, one of the things that a hot composting will do is it will pasteurize. It basically will kill off any disease, but you have to hit like 140, 150 degrees, which means you have to really actively be composting, turning it. The other thing is the seeds, it will also kill off the seeds. One thing when you do cold composting, the seeds will survive. One example is at our compost demonstration garden, we had one compost bin that grew some lovely cherry tomatoes and some pumpkins for us. So that's the one thing. With the vermicomposting, it is a cold form of composting. It will not kill off seeds. So if you were to throw in like leftover tomatoes or, you know, tomato plant, yeah, it's probably going to come back.
Okay. I lost my line, my setup, so I'll let
It's okay. Someone wanted to know if the slides would be available.
Oh, the presentation? I
Mhm.
can certainly, if you would like, I can send you a PDF of it, which would be easier. It won't take up as much space. I can certainly send that over to you, Sue and Patty. And if you wanted to send it out to the list
Sure.
of people,
Mhm.
more than happy to provide that. And that handout that you sent out to folks who signed up, also a phenomenal resource.
Yeah, so
Great,
we'll
great
make
information.
sure, oops, sorry. When we do the recording, when we have the recording ready and up online, we usually send out an email to say that it's up with the handouts that we would have. So we could put all that together.
When I get back to the office tomorrow, I will convert it to a PDF and I will send it over to you guys.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
That works. Yeah, and lots of thank yous.
Yeah, it was a
Somebody,
great presentation. Thorough. Awesome. Thank you.
And just remember, it's not rocket science. Just go have fun with it. You know, it's easy. It really is. And the worst you can do is maybe kill a few worms, but you'll learn. So yeah, go out there and just, you know, jump in and do it.
or maybe Sandra's going to wind up being you're going to be our worm rescue. You know, we have to come see you.
Yeah, yes, I do.
I can't have some worms. What do we do? Can you take them?
Please take these worms.
But MJ did clarify, it's she, her, but she said they did do a lot of experiments with bedding types, straw, which takes forever, almost like forever, to break down. So you may not want to use straw in your worm bin, I'm assuming. And now watch out for the Asian jumping worms, which we had talked about that early on, but be sure you can identify them because they become an east.
The straw, because it has like a tubular shape, it's almost, well, like a straw. If you're going to compost straw, I would do it in an outside bin. And I found the best thing is to mix manure with straw because that really gets it cooking very quickly. But yeah, in a worm bin inside, yes, it's going to take a very long time. And one thing with the shredded paper is I do find that it does tend to like clump a lot. That is the one problem with shredded paper. So
I have it mixed up a little bit with, you don't want, do you want to do cardboard for in your worm bin, or you really should just stick with the paper or something softer?
you know, you could, but I look at it as cardboard is readily, you know, recycled. We actually like to get it. So I try to find stuff that, you know, isn't going to be recycled as easily or make as good a product. So, and the chipboard, you know, the worms love it. And yes, someone will ask, I'm surprised no one asked about the ink. The ink is soy based. So it doesn't matter. The only thing you don't want to use is say like glossy material like magazines.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Sandra, you gave a tip the last Master Gardener class, which was 2020, I guess,
Yeah.
that you did in Ocean County. You had mentioned that wet cardboard can go in the compost. Man, did that help me out.
Oh, good. Yeah, because we can't.
Yeah, because it was like, what do I do with this stuff?
Yeah. Once it becomes wet, it loses its value. But certainly, and Tanara uses it as a weed killer, like a weed block, and then it decomposes. So that's another great thing you can do with cardboard if it gets wet. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to have you back again. And then this time you'll talk
Wealth of
about all
knowledge.
about recycling in general, because as we know here in Ocean County and New Jersey, will be starting to change up a bit with the bag ban. I'm in Stafford Township in Manahawkin, and our bag ban starts in December. And I know you guys were talking when we started in May
May,
for, I guess, everybody else.
the state, yeah.
So keep that in mind, everybody.
Yep,
It's coming.
and we're taking more more materials in the recycling, so we've just been trying to get the word out to let people know. So that's another one. Tenera's phenomenal with sustainability, zero waste, and microplastics and marine life. So all wonderful topics.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be sure to hit you up again.
Okay, look forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Tanera, even
Thank
though you
you
didn't want
so
to be on
much.
screen. Thank you.
too.
And yeah, we
And her
enjoy.
elbow?
Yep. Oh, elbow. That was her elbow. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So,
Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hang on.
I'll start banging on the table and the laptop will jump.
no, but thank you all very much. And and join us again. Like a daily talk is October 19th. So you can go on our RCE of Ocean County website and you can find the link there to link to that. And then our last program of the year is gardening railroads or garden railroads
Oh,
that
garden
you
railroads.
can make, in your garden for outdoor pleasure and entertainment and watch the trains go around you. So that'll be in November. So thank you, everybody. And we'll be looking to see you on the other side of the screen next time around.
All right, thank you very
Thanks
much.
again, everybody.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
night.
Okay, you too.
You too.
Oh, I got to stop everything. It's always one thing I forget.
There we go.